The Arabian horse breed has been around for thousands of years, living among the desert tribes of the Arabian Peninsula. Through the ages, the Arabian horse has become domesticated and formed a bond with man that to this day is still a sought-after treasure. Keeping this breed going are countless men and women who have dedicated their lives to continuing the Arabian horse heritage through breeding. Every year, phenomenal Arabian horses are produced by the breeding industry. Many of the horses go on to have successful showing and breeding careers because of their great start in life from their breeders. We wanted to take an inside glimpse of how these breeders got to where they are today, so we sat down to learn more about their great stories and memories from their time in the breeding industry.
A story that I remember growing up with, my father, who loved to tell stories, would tell this about how we got into our first Arabian. My parents were out looking for a riding horse for one of my older sisters, and they happened upon a very today in the Egyptian world, a very, very well-known farm, the St. Clair's, who have worldwide influence on the Arabian horse. So they happened to be in the same city that I grew up in, and my parents went to visit this farm, and this white Arabian stallion stuck his head out the door and whinnied, and my dad said, "Now that's my kind of horse." And what he did was he traded his dune buggy for a down payment for the horse, and thus began our first step into the Arabians. And I was young at the time. I probably was probably 6 or 7, and it was this white Arabian stallion, and I would take and I would hop on him bareback with just a halter and lead rope. He would neck rein, and I'd push the lead rope on one side to make him turn one way, and I'd push my hand on the other and ride him around the farm. And I remember my mother saying, "Jolene, you get off that horse right now and you put a saddle and bridle on that horse." And I'd always say, "Oh, it's fine, don't worry." And the things that we do when we don't know better, and I don't know how I'm still alive sometimes, lived through my childhood, but I would tie him to my old rusty swing set with a garden hose and hose him down. I mean, this is an Arabian stallion with mirrors all over the farm. Hose him down with, like, straight into his face, and I remember him just standing there, you know. And sometimes when I'm trying to give baths to horses, like these days, I'm like, how did I ever live through that? So his name was, barn name was Tut, and he was a wonderful horse and a perfect example of what, I mean, even the stallions make wonderful family horses. So, and actually my father would tell a story also about this same horse, that something happened in our neighborhood out in the country where a herd of like 5 or 7 horses got out, and the police came and they were trying to round up this horse, and my father said, "Well, you know, I have an idea. Do you want my help?" "Oh, no, we'll get it. Well, a couple hours they came back and they said, "All right, well, what's your idea?" And so my dad got on Tut and rode him out, and all the other horses followed him back, and they caught the horses. So,
if you really are attracted to a horse, I was always lucky. I always had horses in my life come to me. I never really felt like I had to do an effort to get a horse. I always, in some way, had them come to me. In some way, they always ended up with me. I had Ansada Omar Halim Shah, he died in my arms. As a small child, I had this Arabian horse world, and there was a picture in from Ansada Sinan as a foal. And I went to my mother and I said, "Oh, I want that foal." And 2 years later, he was in my barn. I was living on the other side of the world, and still that horse came to me. And this happened to me many times. You know, I even remember that I was in Belgium and I was looking at these first pictures that Rick Valem took when he went to Qatar of the horses from Al Rayyan farm. There were these pictures of Aisha and of Ammar and all of and I was looking at these pictures and I was like, wow, look at these pictures. 5 years later, I was a stud manager. It's it comes to you. A good horse, and you love it, it's always gonna come to you. And I think that's the most beautiful thing I can say about that.
There's a lot, but I think what probably a pivotal point for me in the Arabian horse was I went with my parents to Poland in 1995, and I've always been fascinated with the history, but when I learned of the history of the Polish studs and saw the horses and the combination of how they raced the horses and showed the horses and the versatility of them and the beauty of it, there was something that, and this sounds a little corny, but it's something that touched your soul, and it really became part of me. And it's why I worked for Polish Prestige and then started working for Pride of Poland, and I just have a great passion for those horses, and I think that's kind of what started me down the road, and the history of what they risked their lives for these horses, and so that was really appealing to me. As far as funny anecdote, I mean, I think what's interesting about the Polish horses is everyone kind of views me as I just love the Polish bloodlines, but that's not necessarily the case. I mean, it's more of a philosophy that the Arabian horse is versatile, and it can do every discipline. It can be from racing to in the show ring, and that's something that, when I talk about being a Polish fanatic, it's that it's a philosophy more than just specific bloodlines.
Over the 50 years, I've shown not a lot, not in great numbers, but I've always had something that I was showing. And my claim to fame in the national world is Coeta Phoenix, the Western horse that has been many times national champion with his other owners, so to speak. And my 7-time national champion, Coeta, called me Emmy, who is my half Arabian that I sold as a 3-year-old, but she is now back with me and as a broodmare. But my greatest thrill in showing was, I'm in Region 12 in Georgia, and we have a Spotlight Futurity program, like the Signature program here in Scottsdale. So I bought a breeding, created my child, raised him to a yearling, took him to the Spotlight, and it's an amateur, you have to show. So I had to show him myself. He won both classes. He won the Futurity class and the auction class. And it was before the home crowd, So I still have this mental image of taking this horse out of the ring. He was by Audacious, PS. I still have that mental image of taking him out of the ring and the home crowd giving me a standing ovation. That was the high point of my career. And he's since been sold and still going on and winning as a halter horse and a Western horse.
I had a mare years ago that was delivering a foal, and its front legs were turned back. And I was fortunate that we had a good vet that was pretty close to us. But when you read it in a book, it just says you reach in and you turn the foal's feet up so that it can get in position to be foaled, or you put a rope or something around the legs and pull it up. Well, none of those articles that I read said anything about the mare contractions and how difficult it was to do that. And so actually, the vet showed up, and we were pretty sure the umbilical cord was broken because this mare had been trying to deliver this foal for probably a half hour by the time we got there. And the head was out of the foal, and the vet said, Dean, he said, I think I can save the mare, I don't think I can save the foal. And he said, I'm going to pull both legs out. He said he actually gave the mare some drugs so she stopped contractions, and he was able to straighten the legs out. He said, I'm going to count to 3, and when I hit 3, just pull as hard as you can. And so we pulled this baby out, and the mare was standing in the aisleway. The baby hit the ground, and I thought, oh man, And he reached over with some straw and he rubbed the foal's face, and she sat up, and she stood right up. She never struggled to get up or anything, and I mean, it was just like the most amazing thing in the world. And I didn't sleep that night, and I don't think I slept like the next 3 nights because it was really amazing. But that's you know, something that happens, and it's encouraging and discouraging at the same time.
The horse that was really changed my life was Emanuel from Poland, voice of son that was national champion in 1999 in the United States. I leased this horse from Poland, and it was definitely life-changing horse for me. And on the personal level, that was a horse that was fantastic show horse. He was U.S. national champion halter. He was Canadian Reserve national champion park, Scottsdale national champion English pleasure. You know, on and on and on. Horse that could do both. But on a personal note, that was my friend. I could go to his stall and I could stay with him at night, and I could, you know, do things with him, and that was love of my life. So that's the horse that was never going to be replaced in my life.
I think a very personal story is that we have a mare who is blind, and she was about 5 years old, and she contracted leptospirosis, and she gradually went blind over about a 6-month period in both eyes. And we never bred her, and we were concerned about breeding her, but she's a very beautiful mare. And we decided that we would breed her firstly to one of our own stallions. He was related to her, he was a half brother. But we decided that we would take the risk on a foal, you know, without a huge investment, and see what the mare did, how she would react to this foal. See if we could get her to accept a foal, let a foal nurse without you know, her blindness getting in the way. And we had a nurse mare lined up that if this foal or if this mare would not accept this foal for whatever reason, that we had a nurse mare that could raise the foal. So we had it all organized, and the mare came up to foaling, and she had a completely normal foaling without any problem at all. Everything was completely normal. She's a mare that we still turn out in a pasture. She has a friend. She has an old mare that lives with her that's her sort of her seeing eye horse. And the mare foaled, and she had a very lovely filly. And when she stood up after foaling, she refused to move. She refused to lift her legs off the ground. And she shuffled around the stall through the straw until she encountered her baby with her feet. And then she put her head down, and she'd found her baby, and she raised that baby as if she was a sighted mare. But when it was in the stall, the baby learnt very quickly to stay either in the very center of the stall or in the corners under the feeders away from where the mare would walk. And in the beginning, we put a little halter on the baby, and we put little bells down the side, so that the slightest movement of the foal, the bells would ring and the mare would know where it was. And so she would go out in a 14-acre field with her baby, and the baby would zoom around like a completely normal baby, but her blind mother would know exactly where she was and would deal with it in a completely normal situation. And I think that that's a true testament that this mare knew that if she'd moved her legs and lifted them off the ground, she may well have trodden on her baby. She didn't do that, and she shuffled around that stall until she found her baby, and we never needed the nurse mare. And now we've gone on to have 3 more foals out of this mare. She's now in foal for a 5th foal in total now, and all is completely normal. She is dealt with like a normal sighted mare, and I think that's a special story and a testament to the horses themselves.
I think for me, I enjoy showing, and again, they, like Brent mentioned, they have different personalities, and so I enjoy working with them and I show mostly halter right now. I used to ride, but they are so different, and every one of them, you know, responds differently to you. So, but I think for me, like I said, I enjoy working with the babies. I enjoy working with the, you know, starting them out, and for me, there's nothing more rewarding than seeing, you know, the fruit of what we've produced. You know, the following year when the babies are coming, and they start developing their personalities then. And they kind of grow up that way, you know. They need a good start.
It was funny because my mother was really the one that was the most passionate with the horses. I mean, my whole family, you know, loved the horses, but my mother was, I think, passionate about them. And we lost her back in 2006. And I ended up leasing a stallion that, in the tail female line, goes back to one of our main foundation mares. And and fairly close up, like only about 4 generations away. So it was incredibly close up bloodlines to a horse long ago. And it was Mother's Day. And that year was one of the years that I had 12 mares foaling, and was, you know, watching everybody, and nobody looked close to foaling. And so Mother's Day, in the morning, I remember still very specifically, and this was 4 years ago, that I was sitting at my computer working, and I thought, oh, someday it'd be really nice to have a foal on Mother's Day. Wouldn't that be just kind of neat to kind of honor my mother? And so the day went on, and I was actually supposed to be leaving the farm, and mid-afternoon, and things happened that I ended up still being at the farm, and was cutting down trees next to a pasture. And I'm standing there helping with this process, and this mare, I'm, you know, looking out over the pasture, and this mare walks over to this fence line that's 20 foot away from her fence line and whinnies at the stallion. And I still remember, I said, "Oh, Nefersiri, quit teasing that stallion in your condition." And she turned and she looked at me from like 200 foot across. And I was just like, really, in your condition, you know, weeks from foaling, you're gonna be like teasing this boy? So she walks over to her hay pile outside, and she's eating a little bit, and then she pees all over it. And I'm like, what? You're wasting your hay. What are you doing? Well, she walks away, and as she's walking away, I'm like, why is there urine still going out? And I thought, what's wrong? And then I'm like, did her water just break? And I'm like, oh my goodness. And so I'm watching her, and then I see these feet starting to stick, and I'm like, oh my goodness. So we cut off the chainsaws, went running out, and she laid down there in the pasture, beautiful, peaceful afternoon, and had a filly. And so my mother's name was Marianne, and so the filly, of course, is named Hadaya Mariana.
It was Good Friday many years ago, and my daughter showed Arabians, and we were heading to Iowa for a show, and I had a mare that was going to foal probably in the next week or two, but she hadn't waxed or anything yet. And we're loading the car, and just out of the corner of my eye, I saw something just kind of scoot in the pasture with this mare. And I'm thinking, holy smokes, what was that? At first I thought it might have been a dog. And I went down to the fence, and here it was this foal, and it was a Versace foal, and it was Good Friday, so we named her Calla Lily. And she went on to be a national top 10 sweepstakes filly, and she won Region 11 that year. Actually, she beat the filly that was champion filly at Scottsdale that year at Region 11. So, and that was my first Versace foal, and she was really, really special, yeah. So that was a story that turned out well, too.
It's being able to see generations of a breeding program come together over 30 years and being able to remember a great-great-grandmother of a foal that is born, and then see that foal grow up and produce itself, and being able to hopefully play a part in the perfection of the Arabian horse, which doesn't exist, but that's what we're all striving for, is to breed that perfect horse. So just seeing each generation go as we breed farther and farther down the line is very rewarding.
I have 2 funny stories. I'll tell that. And this is about bloodlines, because you're talking about. Now, keep in mind that the WINTERSTEENs, and by collectively I mean my parents and I, have kind of been through. When the first time we went to Poland, it was all about pure Polish, and pure Polish, because we didn't really understand. We hadn't really talked to the directors. We hadn't really fully understood the system. We kind of had this American perspective. I remember in 2004, we were going there, and Gazal Al-Shakab, who is not technically a pure Polish horse, was at Janov Podlaski. And this was something that, for the WINTERSTEENs, this was a little tough to swallow. And like he was standing at a very iconic stud, and he was not a pure Polish stallion. I mean, other stallions could kind of be forgiven because there's a lot of Polish in their pedigree and stuff, but Gazal clearly was, half Egyptian, and so that was hard to hard to square. And it was really a great learning experience for us, because we realized that, we saw like Pianissima, we saw those wonderful Gazal daughters, and that it was really an epiphany that it is really about breeding better horses, and it's not about restricting yourself to certain bloodlines. And so we kind of had this, we were kind of going through this transition. Well, one of the stars at my farm, at my parents' farm, was a monogram daughter. That was part of the, she was a dam, her dam was one of the mares that came over in exchange for the monogram lease. And a lot of people would come to the farm to see her, because everybody kind of knew about her. And I remember one time, I was waiting for my parents to come down, and we were down in the barn, and this lady is looking at the monogram daughter, and she looks up and she goes, monogram isn't pure Polish. And his dam was from Russia, and so yes, I was just about to say something, and my father walks into the barn and he goes, yeah, he's actually from Oregon. And I think it really encapsulated that, it's not about where the horses are from necessarily. It's about, they all come from the same place in the desert. It's about, the quality of the horse. The other thing was Director Trella. Pianissima, who was lost to the breed not too long ago, was, arguably one of the most beautiful mares. And as I mentioned, that was she kind of turned our thinking around when we saw her as a yearling in Janov Podlaski. Director Trella one time said that Director Krstalovich, which was his predecessor, always lamented that Pilarka, which was his Pianissima and Pianissima's great-great-grandmother, he always lamented that he never reproduced her. And she won in Paris, and he was, the pride and joy of Podlaski, and he was always like, I was never able to reproduce that. And Director Trella said he realized from Krstalovich that he didn't need to reproduce Pianissima. He just needed to leave something for the next generation to do that. And so that always struck me, that it wasn't, it's always not about the immediate generation. It's about leaving the foundation for somebody else.
Well, I've been blessed in my career to have been Kimosabi's last caretaker, or he was the last caretaker of me too, okay? He took very, very good care of me, and because of him I got to meet some amazing people from all over the world. But when Kimosabi first came to me, his fertility, he was older, his fertility was not very good. And Mrs. Husband came to me one day and she said, he hasn't bred a mare, a live cover mare, in many, many, many years. So if you have a really good mare, let's live cover him and maybe that will help him. And I told Mrs. Husband I didn't think that was a very good idea. But we had a mare at the ranch, a very famous mare that was very kind and gentle, and I knew she'd be all right with Kimosabi. So The vet was there, and we decided to go ahead and do what Mrs. Husband wanted and live cover Kemosabe. So we live covered him, and he dismounted from the mare and he started shaking all over, and the vet was there and he said, take him back to his stall quickly. And I did, and he's shaking and almost collapsing, and I thought, oh no, I just killed Kemosabe. So the vet checked him out, and he regained his breath and regained his consciousness. And I called up Mrs. Husband and I said, you know, Kemosabe's okay, don't worry, but we live covered him as per your suggestion, and Mrs. Husband, don't ever ask me to do that again. So I said, but don't worry, he's all right, the vet's checked him out, everything's fine. So within 20 minutes, Mrs. Husband is pulling up to the ranch. And I go out to the car to greet her and I said, Ruth, I promise you he's okay. And she gets out of her car and she walks over to his stall and she goes, I know he's okay, I trust you. I just wanted to come see the smile on his face.
I had just bought her, and I had gone down to buy her because Christine said maybe she'd be a great riding horse for my daughter. And it was a rainy day, and Jim Lowe was the trainer down there at the time. And they had explained to me she was green, she still would need to be finished, and I had a great trainer, Bubble Siller, up north, so I would have taken her up there and to finish. And I really did go down to buy a horse for my daughter. But Jim, it was a rainy day. We had to go to a covered arena, and Jim led her in to the arena, and he was starting to say, now Carol, you know, she's pretty green. And I looked at Christine and I said, is this the horse you want me to buy? And she said, well, yes, Carol, it's a Cayum daughter who, she was a huge fan of that great stallion Cayum. And I just looked at her. I think it was the face that was sticking out of the barn door when I first fell in love with that book of horses and the Arabian. And I said, okay, sold. And she said, but you haven't seen us ride her yet. And I said, I don't even care. She, shortly after that, got a little injury. And I thought, you know, instead of trying to get her ready, maybe we should just breed her. And I had just come to Scottsdale and seen Steve Heathcott show a beautiful mare named Famous Facts, who was a Cayum daughter. And she was by Fame VF. And that's how I decided, okay, I have a Cayum daughter at home. I'm gonna breed to Fame VF. And I did that year, and the resulting foal was Showcase.
Breeding that was my specialty, or at least my area of major influence when I was at university, was studying equine science under the banner of animal science, and then studying breeding and genetics. So that whole idea of breeding took me to Poland when I was a young man at the age of 22, which then turned into a 5-year stay in Poland. And so I've pursued breeding at the top level of the industry now for all of my professional career. Fortunate enough to work with a group of fantastic people in Australia by the name of Malawa Arabian Stud, who do a wonderful job breeding Arabians in very much the same vein as the Polish Arabian State Stud. So to have experienced generations now of horses in breeding programs, not only through my direct experience over the course of my adult life, but sharing in that collective experience of the breeders that came before me, whether those were the breeders in Poland or the breeders in Australia. There's essentially 12 to 15 generations of horses in my mind that I always think of every time we go forward breeding the next generation. And I think that's always the most exciting part, is every spring, whether it's the spring in the northern hemisphere or the spring in the southern hemisphere, which I'm fortunate enough to sort of get a constant spring, and the foals just keep coming on some side of the planet. And so there's always some level of excitement to see how the genetics from the last generation came forward to make what is going to potentially change the breed for the positive in this current generation.
For me, it's just something that I do. Even though I have a career in real estate, I try to at least feed my horses once a day on my own, all 55 of them. And I enjoy it. It's like mowing the lawn or doing the yard. But what you find out is when you spend time with them, you get to know these Arabian horses, and they're very, very much like people. They are all total individuals and have their own personalities, their own weird quirks, good or bad, just like people. And when you spend time with them on a daily basis, you get to see that, you know, and you have to take the good with the bad, or not, but it's kind of fun because it's just like people. Some are a little moody, some are, you know, and then there's other ones you just, everybody loves, and you can't help but love them. So I think that's probably for me. I like anything with 4 legs and a tail. I really do. It just so happens that I have Arabians, and I love them though, but because they really are, and you can talk about it all day. I think it's like having children, and until you have them, you really can't experience it. And I think that's kind of how it is with the Arabian horse. Until you really have one and spend time with it and get to know them, you'll see why people get attached to them like they do.
I don't know if I have a favorite story, but I obviously favor the Polish blood. I've imported a lot of Polish mares and immigrants, pure Polish. But I like outcrossing the Polish with the Egyptian horses. I'm not 100% all Polish, 100% all Egyptian. I believe in doing what produces a better horse. If it means crossing it with Russian blood, or if it's crossing it with Polish horses or Egyptian horses, I'm for that. I'm for a better horse.
We had a very famous mare called a STEPPE, and STEPPE is she's found in horses and show horses and breeding horses around the world. So she's made a huge impact, and she spent most of her life in our care. And when I was a senior in high school, she was starting, actually junior and senior in high school, she was starting to get pretty sick, and she was, you know, we babied her and cared for her and made her like a special bran mash every single night, and she had arthritis, and so we would squish like 30 cloves of garlic because it helped with the arthritis, and she got ginger that we cut up, and carrots to make it all palatable, and like Chinese herbs. And so we would make this amazing concoction for her, and then she'd lap it up, and she had this little bran mash face, and she was an amazing mare. And she we were all there when she died, and it was in 1993. So a long time ago. But when you ask about a special event with a mare, it's just caring for her and kind of like being there for her in the end.
So you know, you think about the Arabian horse, and you ask the question like, what events have happened that have created this bond? I can tell you a quick story. The first time my wife and I were alone in the farm, everybody was gone. And Carol and I were having a cocktail, sitting next to the swimming pool. And I looked at her and I said, something's wrong with one of my horses. And she said, well, how can you know that? I said, I have no way of knowing, but I know something's wrong with one of my horses. She said, let's go see it. And so we walked down to the barns, and there was this horse colicking. And so I knew what to do because we've got instructions about everything on our farm, it seems. And so I called the vet, of course, and I immediately got the horse up and walked the horse, etc. And you know, that horse to this day remembers that. I mean, it sounds funny, but I mean, it's just this bond that she knew that I helped her in a time of need. And I think, you know, it's, you know, I just will never forget her for that relationship. And also, you know, I'm a little old to be riding horses like George still does, but I took up driving, and I have a driving horse. And the first time out, I was reserve champion. The second time, I was champion. And it isn't about me. It's about the quality of instruction that I received, and it's about the quality of the horse that I was riding. It is just an unbelievable experience to know that you're that far away from the horse, and you've just got this little lead line that connects you and that horse, and voice commands, and ever soft touch. And it is amazing what they will do for you. I love the Arabian horse. I really